you can see we have two big questions. These are universal questions. Is nature and its forces the real cause of the universe, or is it a divine work of God? Two big different opinions. So we know basically that our kids are being taught something differently. They are being taught that evolution is true. And so we are dealing with the fact that our kids overwhelmingly are being dogmatically being taught evolution. And basically Darwin is their hero. Now it comes to this. It comes to man's written word. That's the way I wanted to phrase it. Man's written word. And so our kids are being faced with this kind of dogmatic philosophy, worldview, that we came from where? We came from the slime. We came from the amoeba, and was a progression up. So as we look at this, we see that evolution brings in atheism. True atheists use evolution to make it true. Science is their way. Science is the tool in which they want to present their argument. And so they believe evolution is science, and therefore, if they can persuade people that evolution is true, they can become atheists. And of course, we know about the communist movement. Communism, think about communism. Communism doesn't want God around. They don't like Christians. They don't like anybody because that believes in a God and has a relationship with God, whether it be Jewish, whether it be, Christian. The fact is that the government is what they need to run. So atheism is extremely important. That's a background. Scientism. You know what scientism is? Scientism is the belief in science, that science is all true. Nothing else can be true but science. And lastly, secularism, where we completely take God away. And that's what we are dealing with when it comes to our public schools, and many schools, by the way. So I found the statistic interesting. The National Center for Science Education did a study, and they realized that they asked biology teachers through a survey, are you teaching evolution? Are you teaching it as a settled science? And so from 2007 to 2019, 51% to 67%, an increase of quite a few percentages, 18%. And so we see that literally there's more and more influence in teaching evolution in our schools. And I must say, it's not just in our schools, it's on TV, it's promoted everywhere. You go to a museum, it's there. It's everywhere. Creationism, 8.6% in 2007, and 2019, it was 5.6%. And mixed messaging. In other words, teacher doesn't want to really approach it, so he doesn't want to teach it very well. So 23 to 12% is what. So we see a decline. What do we see? A decline in creation, understanding an alternative viewpoint. So that's important. So as we look further, we see that, let's see. Yeah. What was taught in our schools? What was taught in our schools? Before, it was creation. God was the creator. We know that the word of God was important. The McDuffie readers, how we learned to read and so on historically in America, you learn by God's word. The American institutions that we have, like Harvard, Yale, they were founded on Christian principles. Many of our colleges and so on. So our educational system was built, by the way, on the word of God. I don't know if you know this, but Charles Darwin went to Christ Church, Oxford College. Christ Church is a place in which you literally learn about the word of God. He was studying to be a preacher, but in that facility, in that idea of learning about the world of God, science was incorporated, natural science was incorporated. So he learned about science too, because science, this is kind of neat, science, okay, at that time, the natural things around them as they were exploring would be combined with religion. And you could see Darwin's report card. It was overwhelmingly, you could see that religion, Old Testament, New Testament, Greek, so on, other languages and so on that went along with it. In 2006, when I went to the American Museum of Natural History, I had a chance to see the Darwin Exposition. And I had a chance to look around, and this is a little exhibit here. As I was going around, I said to the docent, how long is it going to take for me to finish this, this tour? And she said, if you read every word, it will change your life. If you read every word, it will change your life. I was stunned by that, because when I looked to the left of me and right to me, I realized that this American Museum of Natural History, Darwin's Expedition, celebrating Darwin's 150th birthday in 2006. I realized that this was a religious ceremony. You follow me? It was a worship ceremony. And I was amongst people going to church, but there was the Church of Evolution. You follow? And they were not worshiping God, they were worshiping Darwin. But in the beginning, as you started the expedition, you saw the world before Darwin, just another animal. In England during the 1700s and early 1800s, few questions of the biblical story of creation. Everybody believed in creation. So when you think about that, we have really gone a long way, haven't we? Especially now. As we turn into 1900s, we were still, I believe, in our schools teaching about creation, teaching about science, and so on. But in 1924, we had the Scopes trial, and that changed everything around. And in 1950, our schools really started to change. So I wanted to keep this perspective. Now, I checked surveys, and I know that scientists, okay, are not all atheists. Actually, the last survey was done, recent was by Pew. It said that 57% of the scientists do believe in a God or some superpower over them. So they're not quite atheists. But if you check all the fields, you come to the conclusion that if there's atheism, it's going to reside in the science field, okay? There's quite a number of atheists in that area. And there are quite a number of people who are outspoken. And it's not our purview today to get into every one of them, but they're quite outspoken. And so we have lots of literature that speak of atheism and evolution working together. So I want to begin this way to understand, and remember, we're talking about the gospel. We're talking about the need for this, right? So where is natural man? Well, if I look at natural man, the heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. Who can know it? That's Jeremiah 7:19. Behold, I was brought forth in equity and in sin, and did my mother conceive me? So he's confessing. Psalm 51:5 says, even I'm in sin. I was born in sin. We can't get away from this sin, this natural man. It says there is a way that seems right to man, but to its end, the way of death. Proverbs 14:12. As it written, none is righteous, not one. Not one understands, no one seeks for God. Romans 3:10-11. We are in a terrible state. Now, Paul begins this scenario. He wants people to understand that we're wicked and we need the Savior. You follow me? Now, I used to believe when I was an atheist that man was pretty good. That man could do all things. That my thoughts, I could really think. I can think things through. I went to college, I studied science, and I had all the answers. I remember in the kitchen, my mother and I were discussing where we came from, and I told her, you come from apes. And she said, son, that's stupid. And ladies and gentlemen, I admit that that was stupid because I studied the evidences now. And then because my natural man, I didn't know God. I didn't have a relationship with God. I was a natural man. So most of the world, you're listening to me, who doesn't know Christ are natural, right? They have a sinful nature. Paul brings this in when he writes Romans 1:18, 19. It all goes down to 25. The wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and righteousness of men who suppress the truth and unrighteousness, because what may be known is manifest to them, so God has shown it to them. So the truth is being suppressed. Think about it. Is the truth being suppressed from you? And when you think about it, I can answer yes, especially the truth about Jesus. I don't hear it. Do you hear it on the radio? Unless you go to a religious channel, right? You don't hear it. It's not part of our conversation. So the suppression of truth is a reality, especially when it deals with our origins. Romans 1:20 says they were without excuse. It continues, for since the creation of the world, the invisible attributes are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his internal power, Godhead, so that they are without excuse. I love for people to hear the truth. I love for people to know about God and Jesus. Don't you? You want to share your faith. I want to share my faith. And so one of the things is that there's no atheist around. Do you hear that? There's no atheist around. Why do I say this? Because the word of God is true, isn't it? It says, so they are without excuse. So they may say, I'm an atheist. They may proclaim I'm an atheist, but they are lying. They're without excuse. They've already seen God at work. And because of their darkened hearts, they literally continue to go on. And Paul points this out. They become fools because although they knew God, they did not glorify him as God, nor were thankful, but became futile in their thoughts, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Professing to be wise, they became fools and changed the glory of the incorruptible God into an image made like the corruptible man, and birds and four-footed animals and creeping things. I think this is kind of what evolution is about. Creepy things. That we came from the animals. We descended from the primates that climbed the trees. And they came from some other animals. And the story goes on. So yes, Paul was referring to idols. And today there's one big idol. That's the idol of evolution. See, therefore, God also gave them over to their uncleanliness in the lust of their hearts, to dishonor the bodies among themselves, who exchanged their truth of God for the lie, and worshiped and served the creation rather than what? The creator. The creature, creator who has blessed them forever. Amen. It's important for us to understand that evolution, as Paul calls it, is a lie. So, what does Creation Studies Institute, the organization that God has given me to lead, what are we going to do about this? Well, we decided to make a program called Exposing the Myths of Evolution. You see, we don't call them lies, we call them myths. And what is a myth? A myth is a fairy tale. It's something that you tell. It doesn't have to be proven, doesn't it? So that's the point we're getting at. We're going to look at myths that they like to call science, but are not science. We also want to get things straight from the very beginning. So we're going to begin with myth number one. Myth number one is
Get a little break there.
Is evolution compatible to the word of God? So there are many who argue and say, I could go to school, I could learn about evolution, and why wouldn't God use a process like that? Francis Collins, the head of NIH, who's just retired, brilliant man, brilliant, has a PhD in biochemistry, has a MD, did research, exposed the genome, the genome is made of 3.2 billion base pairs, and he was able to open that up And that's a great discovery in 1900, at the turn of the century, 2000. So we know about Francis Collins' discoveries, and he's a great scientist. But I think he missed it. What did he miss? He's a theistic evolutionist. He says that God could have used evolution. And I come before you today and tell you that is not what it's about. You see, I believe three things, and the myths are going to have points, and we're going to stress these points, because if you're going to share your faith, you have to hook on to something, right? So the first thing, it's against the character of God. Okay, that's the first thing. The second thing is the Genesis account is God's word. Now, I don't mess around with God's word, because it says in the scripture, heaven and hell will pass away, but my word will never pass away. That means a lot to me. So I don't want to mess with God's word, but it's against God's word. The gospel is rooted in the creation account. I don't know if you can make the tie, but we're going to make the tie tonight and make sure you understand it clearly. Why? So you can share your faith with others. Three things. So let's go. God's character. This should be simple. Why? Because God is perfect in every way. He is holy and has an infinite knowledge and power, and the creator of time, space, matter, and energy. He is unbelievable, isn't he? You got to think of a God that is everything. That's what you got to think of. And before I could understand that concept, you ready for this? I had to fall down and understand who I was. Remember, I was wicked and I was sinful and didn't know where I was. I was confused. And somebody presented the gospel to me, and it made sense. To shorten my testimony, that made so much sense that I accepted Christ. After I accepted Christ, I had to change my thinking. I was a devout evolutionist and atheist, and I had to start changing. Do you understand? So how could a perfect God create this kind of thing? So this is what I wrote. Why would God use such a deplorable, irrational, despicable process of random chance, accompanied with billions and millions of years of death and destruction in a Darwinian, dreadful struggle of the survival of the fittest that would leave countless numbers of unfit behind? Think about that. Evolution is not an easy process. It's a long process. It is so long, and it's dreadful because so many have to lose their lives. That's the idea of it. That's what it's important. That's why it exists. The word of God. Now we go to the word of God. The word of God says this, that God saw everything that he made. Behold, it was very good. And there was evening and there was morning and the sixth day. So God declares what? It was very good. Very good. That's God's nature. In the beginning, in Genesis 1 and Genesis 2, things were really good. Really good. Adam was given a garden with fruit in it, and all he had to do was move around and do what he needed to do. By the way, he was not created a little baby. He was created fully formed. So was the garden. Everything was there for him. We had a creation fully formed, ready to go. Okay? And we know the story. God gave animals, and he named the animals, and then he gave them a wife. Oh, he loved that. And he went crazy. He says, bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh. He was really having a good time saying, wow, I have a companion finally. And then we understand we will give the gift of marriage. And then he gave us free will. We would not be robots. He says, do not eat of this tree. Okay, you can eat of every other tree. Sounds pretty simple, but always life seems to get complicated, even from the simplicity of things. So we see in Genesis 1, and this is very important. See, because I read the scripture and I take a look and I notice that God said, Genesis 1, yes, I give you homework tonight. Read Genesis 1 and see how many times God says. He says it 10 times. God said, God said, God said. Don't you think he's trying to say something here? Don't you? John 1. John used Genesis. John admired Genesis so much. I love the Apostle John. He's the evangelist. You always got the gospel right there. What's he say? He says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. So you understand the importance of God's Word? It's unbelievable. It's like Jesus Christ. It's like God. Do you know as we look at the word, we see that the word also in Greek means logos. And what does that mean? Rationale. The logic comes from the idea of logos. So God's word is a rationale. In Hebrew, davar means that it is the truth. So when John wrote, in the beginning was the word, he understood what the profound meaning would be. And in John 1:14, he says, the word became flesh. So we see this clearly. In the beginning was the word, and the word was with God. The word was with God. What was God? He was with God in the beginning. Through him, all things were made. Without him, nothing was made that has been made. That's a declaration. So if I read the Bible clearly, there's no question that God did not use evolution because he did it. He didn't go through a process. He did it. His word declares it. Then I go a little further. I say, how about this week? This old expression, a day could be 1,000 years, taken from 2 Peter. Think about it. If you read the scripture carefully, you'll see that God has patience. A day is like 1,000 years. You follow me? A day is like 1,000 years. I'm waiting for you. He could say in the Hebrew language, you could have said 1,000,000 years. That in Hebrew, they said 1,000 years, meaning a long period of time. He could have said 1,000,000,000 years. Today, we use trillion. He could have said 1,000,000,000,000 years, because that's the debt. Trillion. We never use the word trillion, but we hit the word trillion today a lot. So we understand that God was saying he's waiting for us out of context. But the word, you know what the word says? I love this because this is Mount Sinai. And you can't get any closer to God speaking when you go to Mount Sinai. You see, God spoke and everybody at Mount Sinai shook. I mean, they were fearful. They didn't want to see God. So God gave them the commandments. Exodus 20:11 and Exodus 31:16-17 says this clearly, how he wants things done. He created a week, 6 days, and the seventh day I rested, to be an example. God spoke. I had my wife Linda today go over it. I said, I want to make sure I get this clear. Who was speaking? Was it Moses? Was it God? God spoke. And this is what he said: observe the Sabbath, keep it holy. Work 6 days and do everything you need to do it. But the seventh day is a Sabbath day, your God. For in 6 days, God made the heaven and earth, the sea and everything in them. He rested on the seventh day. Therefore, God blessed the Sabbath day. He set it apart as a holy day. Makes sense? Makes perfectly good sense. He did this for an example for us. Why 6 days and the seventh day he rested? Why did he do that? So we can keep the Sabbath. Certainly God, who's God, could have said, boom, here you are. No, he took his time to show you a week of what the Sabbath means. We go on to the next text. Exodus 31:16-17 says a perpetual covenant. Therefore, the children of Israel shall keep the Sabbath, to observe the Sabbath throughout their generations as a perpetual what? Covenant, a sign. It is a sign between me and the children of Israel forever. When I read that forever and covenant, that meant to me there was no way anybody's going to change that. Oh, let's have a 4-day week, or let's have a 10-day week. So for 6 days, the Lord made the heavens and the earth, and the seventh day he rested and he was refreshed. That's the idea of the Sabbath. And I want to get to the last point with God's word, is this. There's no way that evolution, so you can't throw Genesis out 1 and 2 because I know Francis Collins said this could be an allegory, it could be poetry, it could be whatever. It just kind of bringing people together to know that no, this is the exact word of God. But then there's a passage. I got to go over that with you. I thought this is fascinating. The phrase, after its kind, his kind, their kinds, depending what version you use. The phrase is used numerous times in the Old Testament. In Genesis 1, it's used 10 times alone. Okay, the phrase is used for the first time in Genesis 1:11, referring to kind, giving the origins of DNA as a seed. So when it's used as a seed. Now, not just 10 times in Genesis 1, but then you go back and you can check it out, right? After its kind or after his kind or after their kind, depending what version you're looking at. And you're going to pull up, if you go to a Bible index and look at that word electronically, you'll be surprised how many times you pull it up. So what does that tell you? Here's the point I'm trying to make. The phrase is direct conflict with evolution. It disproves Darwin's tree of life, doesn't it? Okay, you with me? Now we're going to go to the third point. What's the third point? It was still dealing with this myth that the Bible is not compatible. The evolution is not compatible with the Word of God. The gospel is rooted on the creation account. And I want to get this clear to you because this is very important for our doctrine of faith. Okay, we see that creation, God did everything. Okay, he made everything. In the Apostles' Creed, we see it over and over again. We see it in many of the prayers that it's a doctrine that God is the creator of the universe. 3 in 1, Jesus Christ, the Holy Spirit. He made everything. He spoke it into existence. We see that the creation itself is the foundation for the gospel. Now, understand me. It's important. It's a foundation for the gospel. You see, there was no death before sin. Genesis 1, everything was good. Remember that? It says 6 times, good, good, good. And it was good, it was good. And then it came to the end, it was very good. We go Genesis 1 and 2, no sin, no death. Remember, everything was good. They're having a good old time. God is gifting them left and right. They're happy. Everything is good. It's really good. It's like heaven. It's like a place I want to be. No death, unbelievable. Then Genesis 3 enters, and we know what happens in Genesis 3. We see death. The whole creation is under the curse. So a lot of people say, well, Adam sinned, therefore it's a sin against man. No, no, no. It is the whole creation that's under the curse. It's just not me. It's not my family. It's everything. Animals get sick, don't they? And they die, don't they? You see, death is never good. The fossil record, when we dig up fossils, we're full of fossils in that museum next door. And you dig up that fossil, it says dead. Now, is that death come because of judgment, or did that death come because of evolution? You got to understand that. See, the whole creation is under the curse. Romans 8:20 to 22, and Genesis 3:17 and 19 talk about this. No fossil record bare until Genesis 3. Nothing's dead. There are no fossils till after Genesis 3. Fossil beds occur because of Noah's flood. Okay, so keep that in mind. So as we look at this, we see in Romans, we see that the earth is cursed. It is actually cursed. It says that the creation itself will be liberated from its bondage to decay, brought into the glorious freedom of the children of God. That the creation itself is what? Liberated from bondage to decay. Ladies and gentlemen, we have earthquakes, right? We have tsunamis, we have floods, we have snowstorms, we have weather that is not hospitable. Do you know why? Because of sin. Okay, it's the earth. We know that the whole creation has been groaning in the pains of childbirth right up to the present time. Does that make sense to you? Everything is under the curse. So it's important to understand that, because that's kind of what the Bible says. I have a smoking earth. You see it? That kind of tells us that we're in the curse. You see, man plus sin equals death. And the verse we use for this is Romans 5:12. It says, therefore, just through one man, sin entered the world, the death through sin, and thus death spread to all men because all have sinned. Then we look at this. We know that Genesis foundational gospel but now Christ is risen from the dead, has become the first fruits of those who have fallen asleep. For since by man came death, by man also came the resurrection of the dead. For as Adam all die, even so in Christ all shall be made what? Alive. And that's important to understand, because you understand that death means curse. Death means sin, okay? So death, first Adam is equal to death. The second Adam is the resurrection. Now, let's go a little further. Evolution. What does evolution say? You ever question about evolution and the fact that it, how do you deal with, let's say, these fossils that die? What do you do with them? You see, evolution says, well, that's good. See, without death, we can't have evolution. You follow me? I'm going to repeat that phrase. Without death, you can't have evolution. Does that make sense? Without death, you can't have things change. You have to have death to have organisms keep changing. See, it's kind of an uphill battle, according to evolution. See, death is kind of the miracle worker. You see, eventually we get up to the monkey, the amoeba gets to the monkey, and then the monkey gets to you. See, it's lots of death. And eventually we get better and better. You see how that works? When we look at that, we say the result of evolution is pain, suffering, starvation, disease, and death. To back this up, I'm going to just give you a quote from Carl Sagan, the past Carl Sagan. He died in 1996. He won the Pulitzer Prize. He never won a Nobel Prize because he really didn't do anything for science, but he was definitely a great public speaker and a poet. Carl Sagan explained death as the hope of the evolutionary succession. This is what he said. The secrets of evolution are death. Ready? Are death of enormous numbers of life that are imperfectly adapted to the environment and time for a long succession of small mutations that were by accident adapted. Time for slow accumulation of patterns of favorable mutations. I don't want to live that way. Am I a mutation? Am I a successful mutation as a human being? Now, there are scientists that would say that's what you are. No, that's not science. We'll get into that. See, mutations are mistakes. They're mistakes in genetic code. And we know about mistakes in genetic code. If anybody says that you're a mutation, you need to explain to them that that's disease, that's cancer. That is not normal. That is against the code. Actually, the code is making it disinformation. You've heard the term disinformation. This is where you use it. Disinformation. You become not what you're supposed to become. You're diseased and you will die. You see how that works? So we understand that. Now you go a little further, creation and death. You see in the Bible, you ready? We have a completely opposite way of looking at death. Death is not a creation. Death is not good. What is death? Death is what Jesus conquered. You see, death is a result of sin. And because of Jesus, we have a resurrection. Do you understand this? Because this is important as we move over to the next myth. So I'm going to go over with you, if you just take the time, we're going to go over myth number one. What's myth number one? It says, is evolution compatible with the word of God? Okay. For point number one, the character of God does not support evolution, right? Doesn't support it. Genesis account of God's word. We read the fact that Genesis account is tight knit. We read about Exodus. We read about the scripture itself after its kind. We see that in John 1 and Genesis 1, that it's God's word. God said 10 times. God said, God said, God said. It's got to be his word. God's word is perfect. It's what we need. It's God's word. And lastly, the gospel is rooted on the creation account. You've got to understand that. See, man was good. And what happened? He sinned. Because he sinned, he needs what? needs Jesus. He needs a savior. He needs a Messiah. You see how that works? So it's set up that way. Okay. The second myth, is Darwinian evolution science, or is it a religion? Okay. Both Christian and evolution are one-time events that no one has observed that rely on the same evidence. The conclusion is based on the presupposition of our belief and worldview. And third, brainwashing takes place in our schools because atheistic evolution is only allowed. And it comes down to what is creation and what is evolution. So both creation and evolution are one-time event, both that no one has observed that rely on the same evidence. That's the point I want to make. So let's take a look. Okay, evolution is defined, relies on a mechanism based on what? Natural means where there's no outside intelligence, no outside energy. Things are made by what? Random chance, and we have to have long periods of time because many things have to die. Prerequisite, definitely need long periods of time. You got to have it. You see, people were thinking of evolution before they were thinking of geology. There was geology already coming out, and they were saying, oh, let's look at the rocks. Okay, now the rocks don't yell out to you and say, hey, I was made this way. They don't have a label on it. They don't have a date on it. So how do you interpret a rock? You interpret on this is what we're getting into. You interpret on your presupposition, you see? You make your conclusion of what you were taught before. That's how you make your presupposition. You make your ideas, your conclusions on presuppositions, long periods of time. Then we see age of the earth, 4.6 million years, and the universe, 13.6 million years. Now, this is the evolutionist perspective. This is what they say. Here we go. One-time event, boom. It took millions and millions of years. You can never repeat it. You can never repeat it. Now, what do we say in creation? Can we repeat it? You can't repeat it. You can't repeat this either. So that's what we have to look at. One-time event. Creation relies on mechanism of outside intelligence and design. We define it as a creator, the one who made the universe from nothing, exhibiting order and design. Prerequisite, doesn't need vast periods of time. We don't need that. The age of the earth, we believe, according to the Bible, is about 6,000 years. It's that young. Creation and evolution rely on the same physical evidence. Same physical evidence. You see, I get a fossil, they get a fossil, we talk about it. We dug up dinosaur fossils, and here I am talking about dinosaur fossils. We have a T-Rex tooth, 65 million years old, they tell me in evolution. 65 million years old. Right next to it, we have a turtle scoot. Now, the turtle scoot is a scoot that we pick up in the Peace River. The turtle scoot is a shell from the turtle. Okay, so is this turtle an old turtle or is it a modern day turtle? Well, that's debatable, isn't it? Because the scoot I have looks like a modern day turtle, but it can also look like an old turtle. Why? Because the turtles didn't change that much. The insects never changed. We'll go over this when we look at the fossil record. Half the animals never changed. Most of the animals that we look at the fossil record, we can't find the changes. You follow me? So we look at this and we look and say, this is definitely a thing that the historical data we have to look at, but that's the only thing we have to look at. So what do we have? Well, we have bones, we have rocks, we can look at the stars and how they're moving, we can look at living systems. The acquisition process is always subject to error. This is science, okay? So now what happens? Well, I bring my fossil in, I bring the scoot in, and I say, okay, now the evolutionists say this. Okay, let's put this slide up, okay? The fact, there's a fossil. Now, what's the belief? I say, okay, this fossil here and this fossil here probably came maybe during Noah's flood, right? Everything's mixed up. That makes logical sense. The evolution says, no, no, no. That's a 65-million-year-old fossil, and therefore, that turtle scoot, you must classify it as 65 million years old, and we'll even change the name. That's an old turtle. And that's how they do it. I thought that all those names were so, I thought they had it all nailed down, but when I studied it, and when you go out to the fossil sites like we do, they're all modern. They're modern fossils mixed with old fossils. On the fossil, now when you dig, sometimes there are burials. That's another story. We'll talk about that later on as a myth, but how they come about. So here's the thing. Science is fact. Observing, describing, experimenting, classifying. I love teaching this. This is fun. Always fun. Always fun to experiment. Always fun to look at God's world. Get excited about it. That's what I did all my life, just getting excited about God's word. But there's a presupposition. Who made it? Did it come from nature or did it come from God? You see, at the end, you're going to come up with a conclusion. Now, I want you to think about this. This is very, very important because I don't think everybody understands this concept. So I'm going to show you this slide and I'm going to bring you up to some points. I love science. And I love it because you can examine it, you can witness. But the idea of studying science is a method, is a methodology. It's called the scientific method. Francis Bacon developed that. He's famous for that. But you have to throw Robert Boyle, Isaac Newton, you have to throw in Johann Kepler, you can throw in Galileo. I can throw a bunch of these scientists in who are Bible-believing people. They love God. And so they studied the universe, and this is what they said. Francis Bacon says, listen, when I look at God's creation, you should see his writings. They're unbelievable. God's creation, I'm there to study it. And I want to see if God did any miracles here in nature. So we're going to study this and we're going to repeat our experiments. We're going to check it over and over again. And you know what we have today? We have the miracles that we see today. The cell phones and the cars we ride and the technology we use and the medicines we use, even the vaccines. I know there's controversy with that one, but I can go on and on. It's experimental. By the way, we'll see it's the problems you can have with the virus in a moment. But these people gave us science and they were Christian. I love this stuff. You see, they wanted to study God's world and were meticulous about it. So what does the same evidence lead to opposite conclusions? The following is this. You see, the reason for this is that both sides approach the evidence with the opposite presuppositions or preconceptions. Creationists who use the word of God to establish their presuppositions upon the origin of life, each dramatically come to different conclusions than to those who reject the Bible as a record of the past. Contrasting presuppositions always produce contrasting what? Conclusions. Makes sense? It makes a lot of sense to me. So when I go out with a geologist who's been taught the earth is millions of years, and I say the rock is young, do you know what happens? They yell at me, they ostracize me. I was up in the Grand Canyon. My witness is my wife. Remember that time? We were there with the kids, and we were dealing with these fossils, and we found all these brachiopods, these shells, beautiful shells, 7,000 feet in the air. And I'm saying, how did they get there? And this little girl says, well, there was tectonic movements that were moving this way and that way. I said, ma'am, have you ever thought maybe there was a worldwide flow? You got a lot of marine animals here. Actually, ladies and gentlemen, 95% of the fossil record are marine animals. 95% of evolution, what they give you are marine animals. That points to what? A worldwide flood. No, I don't think so, but you know, that's religion. She completely turned me off. I didn't like that, but I was nice. I was a little loudmouth, but I mean, I was nice. I want to tell you what I did in Disney World. So the infallible, everlasting word of God, the verbal evidence. See, God saw it. God saw it. He's the one that saw it. It's in his word. And I love this. This is good for, I remember Ken Ham teaching the kids this. He says, whenever somebody says millions of years and tell you that earth is old, just to go to Job 38:4 and ask them this, were you there? Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? Tell me if you have any understanding. Who observed it? Who observed the rocks being laid down? Who observed the fossils being laid down? Who observed that? Anybody in this room? No. You see the problem? It's when we look back in history, we have the same evidence, but the presuppositions and what we carry is what brings us to that understanding. Next, and this is the important example. Presuppositions, we see if we're predetermined creation, we have predetermined order. Natural means for evolution, outside intelligence. Evolution says internal self-order. Creation says time is not important. Evolution says time is very important, it's essential. Catastrophic events, worldwide flood, beginning of creation. That's how we look at rocks. We had a beginning. What's the beginning? Igneous rocks, these big metamorphic rocks, rocks that deserve pressure and so on. And what's the continents? Basically, they're sedimentary rock. You hear that? Sedimentary rock. Where do you find the fossil? In sedimentary rock. What is sedimentary rock? It's basically water-driven particles that make the rock. You're standing right now in Florida. If you're in Florida, sorry, folks online, but we're in Florida. We're standing on limestone. What are limestone made of? Shells. I can go on and on. You see, if most of the continents, 70% of are made of sedimentary rocks, that should be the conclusion of what? We had a worldwide flood, catastrophic event. Creationist worldview, based on God's word. It's based on man's word. Creator outside intelligence, natural processes, absolutes, relativism, absolute accountability to God. There's only accountability to man. Tell me why we have so many problems today. And I'll tell you why. God is absent. And when God is absent, so is his rule. So we get in these arguments. Your biblical creationists are so biased about when you look at evidence. You still should have more objective like me. And that's that's what it's all about. You get in these detailed things and they throw all these fancy terms at, but you know it. Myth number 2 says that both creation and evolution are one-time event that no one has observed that relies on the same evidence. Number 2, the conclusion is based on presupposition on our belief and worldview. Number 3, brainwashing takes place in our schools because atheist evolution is only allowed. And that's what we see right here. So what's happening? Only one view. What's that view? That evolution is true. Can I teach creation, or can creation be taught? Can I bring some? No, that's not scientific. They already canceled us. They canceled us many, many years ago. You talk about cancel culture. We've been canceled for a long time. We've been canceled. They don't want to hear that. It's not scientific. We didn't go to school, whatever they want to say. And so we see this. We see that our kids are being indoctrinated continually. Science becomes evolution. See, we see that the brainwashing continues. And then this idea of naturalism, this idea that naturalism is how everything came to be. That's what our kids are taught. Are they allowed to mention God? No, they can get in trouble if you mention God. So you see the problem. So evolution is a belief system. Evolution equals religion, and evolution has too many unanswered questions to be considered a science. And lastly, it is an idea promoted with fervor and conscientious belief. So, let me tell you, I've met so many evolutionists that have this really, they have their eagerness is based on their belief of evolution. You see that the universities a lot. I went to University of Miami. I stood and I gave a presentation to students. One kid came up and said to me, I still believe, even though what you're talking about, television design, I still believe that I'm an amoeba. I came from amoeba and I have a brain, and that's what I am. I come from material. I mean, that's what he told me. And most people rejected that idea that there came from an amoeba. Most people understand the whole story. We're going to start myth number 3. We did myth 1 and 2. Is evolution incompatible with the word of God? Myth 1. Myth 2, is Darwinian evolution science or is it religion? Now myth number 3. Myth number 3 deals with the fact that we're going to talk about how do you explain the origin of life? And this is very long, this section. I love this section because it confounds evolution. sometimes we talk about intelligent design here. I mean, wherever we go with this, life itself is a miracle. It only can come from the hands of God. And so that's what we want to emphasize. So what do we want to go over so you can share your faith? One is evolution violates the basic laws of science. I want to go through that with you. Evolution violates the basic laws of science. You got a hint of it earlier when we spoke about mutations. Think about it. Mutations are misinformation. Those are mistakes. And we don't want to make mistakes in science. We want to always be correct, right? We want the truth. You don't want mistakes. You don't want things like that to occur. When those things occur, we then lose the purpose of what we're trying to do. So it's very important that the laws of science be kept. Next is today, the electron microscope, we observe molecular machines and complex systems that demonstrate intelligent design. Never before we're able to look at things like we can do now and see complexity that belies the imagination. We're going to say intelligence, but it's intelligent. It's just there. And then you start studying and saying, whoa, how did this come to be? You're drawn to God just by that. Statistical probability of forming proteins are extremely low. That's the first thing you have to do to form life. We'll get into that. And the last part is DNA is an amazing information system that is responsible for all life, has no known evolutionary origin. And DNA is life. It's the information of life. So if I said to you, if an atheist or somebody who doesn't have faith came to me and said, well, I believe the DNA, just came to be. The DNA is intelligence, an information system. So how does an information system come to me by evolve? This is a complicated information system. It's more complicated than our human language. You follow? So how did the system come to? How did you put the words together, make sounds and all that stuff? So to me, it's so much proof that there's somebody out there, a God, that made a language so we can understand. Okay, so let's get into the first one. The first one deals with the violation of laws of science. Now think about it. Molecules to Man, all right? That was the name of a book. But wherever you look, and I know evolution don't like to say this, they don't like to talk about this kind of definition. Evolution is a scientific theory that uses upward change by common descent, demonstrating the fossil record over long periods of time. They like to say change because some of that change doesn't work, some of the change does, but the bottom line is this. I'm standing before you. I think I have some degree of intelligence, okay? I don't want to compare myself to that primate in the zoo, the monkey. Darwin did that. I think I'm more intelligent than the monkey, and I can prove it, okay? I can speak a language. I can articulate. I can think. I can problem solve. Can he do calculus? Can he solve problems? Can he talk a language that is phenomenal? The rules we have to learn, the syntax and how we develop words. That's another reason why I think John is so brilliant studying his gospel. The beginning was the word. So think about that. Just the word itself and our consciousness, our self-consciousness, awareness of who we are. Then I could go into our emotional background. We have 28 subcutaneous muscles on our face. I mean, there's no way that I'm a primate. No way. I'm so different. So I know there's an upward change. And if I'm offending any evolutionists, I'm sorry, online, wherever you might be. But there is an upward change. It's got to be. How from a molecule amoeba to me? Come on. There's got to be an upward change. And then I borrowed this from Ken Ham. This arrow going up and evolution going up. Evolution predicts upward change and long periods of time, millions and billions of years. Okay? So now we're having a problem. What's the problem? The problem is that the laws of science says that doesn't work. You see, there is what we call disorder. It's called the laws of entropy. And evolution violates this in every way. An ice cube melts, okay? A car rusts. I'm getting old. And so are we. We advance in age, and all of a sudden we get prone to so many things. Why? Because evolution is not here. If evolution was here, the whole idea of struggle, survival contradicts itself, you see. See, the bottom line is that we know that death is upon us because why? Because there's a judgment on us that needs to be only relieved through our Savior, Jesus Christ, by trusting in him. So one of the things I make sure I ask my atheist friends, my evolutionist friends, or wherever they come from, how did death come to be? That's a good question. We can argue about life, which we're going to do here, but how did death come to be? And the only way you can answer it was the laws of entropy. Things are going downward, and that's a law. It goes against evolution. So evolution says we're going up, up, and as we look at the laws of entropy, it says after time, you got to go down. The violation of law says matter equals energy. You see, matter plus energy, and so on. We become something, but it doesn't work that way. It's always disorder and death. That's how it works. So we have the origins of death. We know, as the Bible tells us, it's because of sin. That's why there's death in the world. That's why there's suffering in the world. That's why we have calamity, not just in our human species, but in everything around us. So we keep that in mind. So let's go to the second one. The second one now deals with the idea of these electron microscopes. In the last 80 years, since the invention of the electron microscope, the knowledge of the invisible world of biomolecules has grown exponentially. I went to college in the 70s, and I got to see some of this coming out. It was exciting. We had DNA, we were studying DNA. We had some really fancy pictures, 500,000 times the size of a human eye. You can see with an electron microscope. We knew about some things. We knew that in the invisible life that we had a spectrum. And the electron microscope was founded during this time. The light microscope only could take so much, as you can see in the slide. We can maybe get down to 1 micrometer plus maybe, but never a nanometer. The nanometer is very special place for the viruses, cell membrane, and the small molecules. So when people talk about viruses, like the coronavirus, I want you to think of nanometers. Let's not get so hard on these people because we don't really understand too much about viruses. We have an idea, but they're very small. And with the electron microscope, we can manipulate and look at it. For instance, we know the coronavirus has spikes on it. Why? You can see them. You see the spikes. And what they're made of is what we have to take a look at, and we see, and we're going to get into that as we discuss life. So there is a virus, 10 to 100 nanometers. Let me just spend a moment on viruses. Viruses are the most plentiful thing around. Some people say they're not living. Some people say that they're like parasitic. They need living things to get information. They have to host on your cells or host on bacteria, basically, and that's how they get their information. We know this in biology. We know that viruses and bacteria get together. What does the virus do? It hijacks the DNA of the bacteria. And there's a change going on. So biological science has used these changes for genes and so on. So they've been working with viruses and so on to understand makeup of living things. So viruses are important because they manipulate the DNA code. They're able to do that. So as we look at it, you can see it. This is not coronavirus. It's just a little virus. But this is from 10 to 100 nanometers. A nanometer is 10 to the minus 9th meters. I don't want to explain how small it is, but you can't see it even with a microscope. You have to get one of those electron microscopes to be able to see it. So proteins are involved in virtually every chemical reaction that supports life. What am I talking about? You know the word protein. We use it in our vocabulary. We need proteins. Well, I want you to think of proteins as being the structure. Just as you look at the building around us, it has structure, doesn't it? There's walls, there's ceilings, there's all sorts. That's what DNA is. It's the building, it's the structure. It's how we're made up. We're made of cells, and those cells have structure. That structure is the protein. So without proteins, there's no structure. What is there? Energy and space, and that's what you got, liquid floating around. It's when the proteins come together that they give us what we need. So do you understand how important they are? They're very important in life. We know that we have to have proteins to live, just like we need the energy, the carbohydrates and the sugars. All that is important for energy. I don't want to get into too much of microbiology, but that's bottom line. Now, in those proteins, we know that there are basic things that we call amino acids. Again, this is not a chemistry lesson. I just want to set you up so you can relate to others. So amino acids make up the protein. There are 20 different amino acids in a protein that make up life. Only 20. There could be 26, 20. There could be more proteins. There's a limit, but only 20 make up the human life, okay? So when I think of an amino acid, I think of glycine, I think of lysine, I think of alanine. You might be familiar with those or not, but those are basic things that make up the amino acids come together to make up the protein. Okay, they're kind of the building blocks that you put in, like the building blocks around this building. They're the ones that have to assemble themselves and make them into that protein. So I kind of put this up. I put this bead structure up, and I usually take a string of beads and I show you that each bead is a different color and there's 20 different colors. But now you're ready for this. The beads have to be arranged in a specific order. They just didn't come there randomly. They have to come in a specific order. Not only do they have to become in a specific order, they have to go in one direction. So you can be this way or you could be this way in the chain. You could be facing me or you could be back turned. You see how that works? You're still forming the structure. They don't know to go face forward, face backward. We call that left-handed and right-handed amino acids. Well, all the amino acids are left-handed. Now let's think about this. 20 amino acids come together, all different beads, okay? 20 different beads have to be aligned. So you have to go through a jar and pick them, okay? And line them up the way they go. Now, I will tell you that DNA does this for us. It's the information system. Remember I told you about information? It has the code to do this, to make these proteins that are important to us. All right, so I think I explained this simply. It's like making a beads, making a fancy, little chain necklace for yourself. But there's another thing. The beads actually form a shape. So let's say a simple protein, 150, would literally have to form a shape. So that's a three-dimensional shape. You follow? Now we're really getting complicated. You follow me? Got to get the right beads. You got to put them in that place. They have to be all one direction. And not only they have to be 150, let's say 150 in the right order, they have to be in the right shape. So let's take a look at a little differently. There is the amino acid. See the amino acid? The amino acid turns into, let's see if I can find my pointer. If I can't, the amino acid goes into a protein. The arrow goes up, you see it, it goes into a protein. And then the protein, you see, it's called a polypeptide. It's just a unit. That unit then goes, that unit goes next to builds up the protein. So the peptide is a unit. The unit then goes into this, and we make this peptide. Is a protein. Okay, so we start off, let's say, with protein. The protein gets wounded up, separates. This is digestion of protein. When we take our proteins and they have to be digested, so they get cut up just like that. So we take it in reverse. Okay, and we can actually do this in the lab. We can actually digest the protein just like you would do it in your stomach. Okay. And that's how we live. We have to get back to the simple shapes, which are amino acids. The amino acids come into our system, and that's how we live. All right, so far, shouldn't be too complicated. Okay, just stay with me. All right, so here's a protein. I love to show this. Oh, I love this. I believe this has to do with our muscular system. And you notice the folding that goes in there, and they have to go in a certain direction and so on. See, we call this machinery. These are what we call nanomachines, molecular machines. You probably never realized that you have molecular machines in your body, millions of them, all doing something, all being function of maybe a process, whether it be one of the muscles that you're dealing with, or it could be an enzyme that has to move around and carry things or give signals. You see, it always goes by key and lock. It's like it's got to fit into each other. It just doesn't randomly go. It's like putting a puzzle together. It's got to get in there. So that's why you have the shapes, so you understand this. Now, when we did this with the electron microscope, I was praising God. They were looking, oh, well, look at what we could do. No, that was what God was showing us. It was unbelievable. And so we see the hemoglobin molecule. It's a machine. And it's made of 200 to 300 million hemoglobin molecules. And over here towards the right, you can see the hemoglobin molecule. You can see it. It's all wounded up. You can see the little notches and so on. There's the hemoglobin. That's what it looks like in our blood. Okay, I mean, that's a red blood cell. Now the hemoglobin goes in there and makes up that hemoglobin, and that's the molecule right under it. You see the red blood cell right underneath there is the hemoglobin, and 200 to 300 of those million make up red blood cells. Now, I'm not throwing this around. I like to talk about hemoglobin because if I said to you that you are basically hemoglobin, you might be, maybe you're offended. I don't know. The problem is that the iron, there's iron in the middle of that. That iron catches the oxygen, and that oxygen has to be taken for a ride. It has to go through your heart, goes into your lungs, gets deoxygenated, goes back again, and it goes through a process and literally delivers the oxygen to every cell in your body. You will die in 4 minutes of oxygen deprivation, particularly in your brain, because 20 to 25% of your blood supply goes to your brain. So your first resource is always clean air. That's the first resource. That's how we live with clean air. And we're designed that way with these molecular machines. So I'm praising God. I'm not saying this is an accident, this is a miracle of nature, like you would get at Discovery Channel. You see, I can say, praise God for this. I can't say evolution did this because I know better. That's ridiculous. There has to be an intelligence behind it. Myoglobin molecules are found in muscles. It's mostly large cell polypeptides that make most of the muscle material. You cut that in half, you have what we call you cut that big hemoglobin in half, you have now myoglobin. And myoglobin is important. Why? Because you need blood, you need iron, you need the iron and the oxygen in particular, to get into your cells. So this is an amazing, amazing machine. And look at it. So I told you about cells. Let's take a look at this. There are 30 trillion cells in the human body, 30 trillion. 80% of them, 80% are made of red blood cells. That's where most of your cellular material is. You need the oxygen. And when you look at the hemoglobin, you have to come to the conclusion that that's a perfect design that nobody can match. Okay? Remember I told you about the amino acids and folding and so on? These are thousands of these guys, thousands of them, all coming together to make the hemoglobin. 80% of your blood supply is in that process. So 20 different amino acids, okay, to go into the fact of a polypeptide, eventually into the protein. A single protein is made of 150 amino acids. The probability of one functional protein formed out of 1 times 195, that's 1 with 195 zeros after it. The chance of that is impossible. You follow me? The chances to make that protein. I'm only talking about, I didn't even mention hemoglobin. Forget about hemoglobin. I'm just talking about a simple protein made of 150. Do you understand this? There's got to be intelligence behind this. There's got to be something working. Actually, I don't do this, but if you like the lottery, I thought I'd throw this in. You have to win the lottery 24 times straight. Every time you pick up that card, you pick a winner. Every time you pick that card, you pick a winner. Are you ever going to win once? Okay. I don't play the lottery because I know my chances of winning once is not going to happen. Oh, somebody else going to win. No, I don't play that game. And that's money that's going down. Anyway, so the bottom line is that when we took a probabilities of life, we know that there's got to be something behind this. Statistical problems. They are bent, folded, and twisted into shapes like a key fits into a lock, only with much greater precision at molecular level. Next step. Less is the number, lest this number was overturned somehow. A decisive blow that had been dealt of the idea that proteins arose from accidental causes. There's no way that this could happen. Even with the evolutionary time frame, millions of years, there would be not enough time to build a functional protein to be part of a cell. I can go on and on this. We talked early many years about this, but now we even learn more about it, and it's more complicated. So we used to use this years ago. The chance that higher forms have emerged the way that's comparable with the chance that a tornado sweeping through a junkyard might assemble a Boeing 747 and the materials with their within. I love that quote. It's like a tornado going through a junkyard to assemble a plane, the 747. Those are the chances. Could that ever happen? Okay. Here's another quote. That was from Hoyle. This one comes from discoverer Francis Crick, discoverer of DNA. An honest man armed with all the knowledge available to us could only state that in some sense, the origin of life appears at the moment to be almost a miracle. So many are the conditions which would have been satisfied to get it going. Now, Watson Crick believes that DNA is too hard to happen here. It had to come from where? Panspermia. It had to come from space. And lots of people are following this now, that space has the secret to life because it can't happen here. All right. So they have, that's the kind of religion too. So here's an example of intelligent design. This is another example. There's plenty of these. We have a molecule, we have a bacteria with a tail on it. It's called bacteria flagella. See the tail? Oh, bacteria. Every time I talk to you about bacteria, most recent estimates number of cells at around 30 trillion in the human body. Okay, how many bacteria do you have? You have at least 2 times. So for every cell, you can count at least 2 bacteria. So you're more bacteria than you are cells, than you are proteins. I mean, that's not ever a protein, but I mean cells. That's a better comparison. So as we look at this, we see that 10 more bacteria cells. Throw that in. But take a look at the tail. Now, when we started the intelligent movement, that was a big thing. I've got to show you this because this is kind of fun. Here's bacteria to show you how many there are. It's just an illustration. It's going past a leaf and you can see them moving. So, you know, when we say we're cleaning the table, we're cleaning this, you're still going to have bacteria around. Actually, probably the dirtiest place is not the bathroom in your house, it's probably the kitchen. Keep that in mind. Okay, so we have these creatures walking around and they all have a tail. Tail moves 6,000 to 17,000 RPM. That's really fast. Now, living organisms have to move. And because they have to move, they have to have a lot of RPM, a lot of force to move them back. It moves 2 directions, frontwards and backwards, reversing a quarter of a turn. This is a beautiful engineering. The fact that you go this way, and all of a sudden you got to go back. And that's what it does. It reverses itself. As an acid protein driven motor, whenever I put this down I just tell you it's water driven. And the water is more acid. So what happens is that it can keep going and going and going and going, and it will keep going. The motor doesn't have to stop because there's always energy there. It occupies almost 100% efficient. You know how you need water, right? You can't live without water. That's the reason why. 40 operational parts in that little tab. A rotary motor cooled by water. So imagine that. This is the bacterial flagellum. It's got a stator. It's got everything. A junction, a hook. If you take a look inside, you can see all the different parts. It goes through the cell membrane, and then inside you can see it's got a C ring. There are 30 different proteins that make this up that copy themselves from a few to a few thousand. Now, how did this come to be? Evolutionists like to talk about, well, we found how half of it was made, and now we can believe that maybe the other half could have been somewhere else. They always look at things that might have some similarity. That's how evolution looks. For instance, humans have femurs. So do monkeys have femurs. Therefore, humans and monkeys are connected. No. When I do this part, I will tell you that a monkey and a human has to have 100% different anatomy to walk upright. The anatomy has to change 100%. You follow me? It's not easy to do this. It's very difficult, very, very difficult to make these changes. It's not easy. Evolution gets lost in the details. Actually, it's the devil. So we see an engine working, we see a cell working. An engine we know needs a manual. Life needs a manual. That's intelligent design. Think about it. We can make an engine. We can make a gas engine. We know exactly the parts. We have it in manuals. We can share it with everybody. The cell has a manual. It's a DNA. Where does that come from? I believe that's a God thing. Is the origin of life as we see it a process of random habit genetic changes? No, there's a manual. Now, last phase, DNA. DNA. The Bible talks, and we talked about this, about the seed. The Bible says after its kind, and Genesis 1:11, it talks about plants and the seed inside the fruit. Well, the seed is DNA. It's a code of life. So when we have a seed, the seed develops to where it's predetermined. It's predetermined. Why? Because the chemistry, the biochemistry inside the seed determines what's it going to be. It doesn't hang out in the womb and say, I think today I'm going to be a monkey. So when these people give birth, they're not going to see a human, they're going to have a monkey. Imagine if that would happen. Now we're 99% monkeys. You would think that would happen, like monkeys. That's what they say. That's not true. But basically, what is it? Now, I mentioned Francis Collins developing code, human code. This is kind of what they looked at. Take a look. You see the CG and the T. See the CTG. That's basically a code. It's A, T, C, G. And A connects to T, C connects to G. And that's our code. That's simple. I mean, you just remember. Okay? A connects to T, C connects to G. I don't want to tell you the names. They're in there, cytosine and so on. But they connect. That's a code. It's almost like a binary code in computer language. Oh, so it looks like dots and, a dot and a circle, meaning nothing. So you got information. It's the same thing. It's a code. It's a code of life. And so in this code is information to make what? Everything in life. 3.2 billion pairs. That code tells us what's going to happen. Is it going to be a plant? What kind of animal it's going to be? What kind of plant it's going to be? It's going to be, listen to your DNA. There are still holes in sequences. 21,000 human genes only used to make 300,000 proteins. So a gene, I'll explain that in a second. A gene is a cut of the DNA. You'll see it in a moment. I have a picture, an illustration, a slide to show you. But 21,000 genes make 300,000 proteins. That's basically a formula. So our DNA code has genes. Out of that 3.2 billion, it's cut, and those genes from the DNA make the proteins that we have. Usually, it's this is an average. For every protein, you have like 10 genes interacting. So it's not just one gene making the protein. It's like a chorus. It's like going to say, okay, I want this protein made. So what we have is genes interacting to make my hair brown and make my hair whatever it is. That's how it works. You have an orchestra right inside you that decides where to play and how to play. Okay, it's never just one. It's always a bunch of them all together. So only about 1% of DNA is made of it makes a protein, coding genes. Another 99% are non-coding. They used to say that was junk. And then we found something. What did we find out? We found out that evolution was saying, oh, that's junk. That's how we evolved. Guess what we found? We found that the non-coding DNA does not provide instructions for making proteins, but does so much more in assisting building these awesome molecules, these protein molecules. They help shape it, they help balance it, keep consistency. We're finding a whole new array of things that we never knew before. So I think about this and I say, how did this come by chance? I look at this, the idea of just dwell on this, the idea of the DNA molecule. Okay, if I were to take a DNA molecule and I would give it the weight, the 15, I look at the length. The length would be about 0.5 gram. It can go 93 million miles. Just string it along. Right now, there's 6 feet, about 6 feet of DNA in you. Just string it out. And if I were to string it out, I can go 93 million miles. One DNA is 6 feet. One DNA. Okay, you're made of much more than that. Okay, so that thin thing can stretch out 93 million miles and only weigh 0.5 gram. That's like a small paper clip. Okay, how about this? We're talking about information. You need to make 15th weight of a postage stamp can make 5 billion people. Now, how does that happen? DNA is a fascinating molecule because you'll see it wraps around and can store that information. People are looking at this now and trying to study it and saying, how can we store information? Because this can store anything. You don't need library. We can store it maybe in a code, maybe in a molecular code. Maybe we can store, I mean, this is a whole new thing. People are looking at this saying, DNA, wow. It can make that 5 million people have a code weighing 1/15th weight of a postage stamp. It's got lots of information in tiny space. It's the most amazing thing. Examine the DNA molecule unravels in bacteria cell a rate of 10,000 revolutions per minute. When it opens up, boom, the DNA just, I'm going to show you in a moment how that works. The DNA opens up and then it gives the information out necessary, okay? In 10,000, it opens up at 10,000 revolutions per minute. So quick. It's got to open up real quick, get what it has to do, the information, and then take it from there. So what we see is that the DNA, the code of DNA, for every 3 codes, if you're into computers, for every 3 codes, like an A, T, T, makes a amino acid. And then another one by 3s, T, T, A, makes a code, another amino acid. And then in our body, in our cell, it starts assembling the amino acids to make the protein. You got a manufacturing system right in your body. Hey, listen, you're throwing off epithelium cells all the time. Do you know that for every 30 days, you go through a whole array of epithelium cells? The whole body casts off. All your skin goes off and new skin comes back in every 30 days. So that's why we need to take showers. That's why we need to dust our houses. Every time you dust, just take a look at the rag and say, that's me. Because your cells are going all the time. So DNA is a very important process. And replication, this is what's neat. Replication is so precise that it can be compared to 280 clerks copying an entire Bible sequentially, each one from the previous one, with one single letter being transposed erroneously in the entire copying process. 280 clerks taking a Bible and taking that, after they finish their copy the Bible, move it on to somebody else. Don't copy from the Bible, move that copy to somebody else. And you got to go over 280 clerks with this copy, pass that copy around, and we'll only get one error. DNA is fantastic, but you have mutations in your life. And what do you do with those mutations? Do you know? You pass them on to the next generation. So the bad baggage I have, my children have. And they were compounded because I brought my parents' bad baggage into my genome. And I passed it on to my kids. So the expression is, we're dying faster than we think. So I told you about 10,000 times. Take a look at this. See it? Look what it does. That's the DNA opening up and closing. When it closes, what does it perform? It's called the chromosome. You have 23 chromosomes. Okay? They're paired up. And we pair them up because half go to the female, half go to the male, and that's how we get that's how we have variations within that kind. So it's amazing, 10,000 RPMs. That's why you can see it so quickly opening up. It stores itself in a magnificent way. There's a DNA, there's a code. The code is coming out of the cell. There's a chromosome. The chromosome opens up. Before you know it, you have what we call a protein. The protein makes you, eventually makes the cell that you're missing, the epithelium cell. So I told you, here's the DNA, okay? It's in a chromosome all locked up, really, really tough. And then when it opens up, there's only a section of that DNA called a gene. You see that section? It's clear. You see how they cut it? That's a gene. Your genes give the information to make the proteins. That's why we say the expression, we come from our parents' genes, because that's the sections that make us who we are. All right? Genes make proteins. 10 genes can trace one protein. There are no estimated 300,000 different kinds of proteins in humans. Scientists estimate 2 to 4 million proteins make up a bacteria. One bacteria, one I just showed you, you have to do 100,000 times magnification. You can't see it. You have to have a high-powered light microscope to be able to see a bacteria. They're much larger than viruses, maybe 100 to 1,000 times larger than viruses. Okay, so we deal with those. Time magazine said this: chimps and humans share almost 99% of their DNA. New discoveries reveal how we can be so alike. So in 2006, when this came out, I was in the airport of Chicago, and I went into this airport, O'Hara, and in that, where they were selling magazines, it was plastered everywhere on this window. I mean, he had it everywhere, this magazine, Time, How We Became Human. And then underneath it, it says chimps and humans are almost 99% of their DNA. New discoveries reveal how we can be so alike. Then in the magazine, this is what it says. I'll go over that in a moment. That's not true. Today, we analyzed a study and realized that although we had the human genome, we didn't have the chimp genome when they did the study. The chimp genome was incomplete. So what did they do? They tried to match up the spots that were dissimilar. You see, because you're so caught up by your presupposition that evolution is true, you make wrong conclusions. Okay, keep that in mind. We went over that. So what happens? Scientists keep reminding us, and this is what's right inside the article: evolution is a random process in which haphazard genetic changes interact with random environmental conditions, produce an organism somehow fitter than its fellows. That was written in the magazine. I'm reading this and saying, is this intelligent? Where did this come from? If I was from another planet and I was reading this, I would say, this is garbage. This is fiction. This is a myth. Well, it is a myth. Actually, we did the studies. It's more like 85%, and it could be more like 70%. 1%, by the way, is big differences, so we keep that in mind. I got to show you this. This is amazing. Yeah, It was thought that 98% of the DNA had no use. We know it has use. Now we see that most of the DNA has other purposes. So let's talk. You have a little caterpillar walking around. My wife and I actually did this with our grandkids. And we taught this little caterpillar is a great exercise. And you take this little caterpillar and you put it up there and they give you all the things to do with, and it makes a little cocoon, makes a chrysalis, and it winds itself up. And then what happens? It literally, the wings go to the side and it starts regenerating itself. It has a rebirth. Remember the rebirth, the recreation? You're a new creature. That's what we see. It's called metamorphosis. It's called metamorphosis. Okay, don't get hung up with just a butterfly. Okay, there are lots of creatures that go through what we call complete metamorphosis. You know about the frog, right? And the tadpole? That's complete metamorphosis. Okay, there's metamorphosis, incomplete metamorphosis when the roach comes out. Now the roach is a larvae, you know that, right? And all of a sudden it grows into what? A roach. You know about the mosquito, right? In the meat. The mosquito one time was a larvae. The eggs went in there, it became a larvae, and what happened? It went through a metamorphosis stage and completely changed into a fly. So the insect kingdom, half the animal kingdom is there. Why did God do that? He wanted to show you who's in charge. He wanted to show you that it's a very complicated process. We have a lot of work to do because when we look at that little caterpillar turning into a butterfly, the DNA is directing it. It's not only directing the proteins, but it's directing how that's going to happen. And so we see this 1 level versus 2 levels, 3 levels, and 4 levels, and 5 levels. There's a lot of levels that we have to try to understand. And before you know it, from that DNA, the information system controls the complete metamorphosis. So I come to you today as we make our conclusion and say to you this. This is a miracle of God. When we look at a molecule, when we look at life, the myth of life, how do you explain the origin of life? Evolution violates the basic laws of science, number 1. Number 2, today, the electron microscope, we observe electron machines. They're complex, demands intelligent design. 3, statistical probability. You can't prove, you can't make life. Number 4, DNA is an amazing informational system that is responsible for our life and has no evolutionary origin. Is that good enough? I think if we're out there and witnessing with these facts, I articulated that. And there's information to help you articulate, but these are facts. These are great things for you to be able to communicate and share with people. And as I conclude, I want to go over this. The Apostle John's definition of life. In him was life, and life was the light of man. That was John 1:4. After he talks about the creation, and he says, let's not think about Jesus, he's the word. In him was the life. And what was the life? The life is the light of man. Who carries Jesus in them? That little story, you don't let your light shine. You have your light in you, let it shine. Well, that's what it's all about. Because we have Jesus, we have the light of man. We need to talk about it. We need to talk about the light, the rationale we have inside of us. That whoever believes in him should not perish, but have eternal life. Because we believe in Jesus, because we believe in him who manifested himself in this creation. Yes, he's invisible. He makes himself known without excuse because we can see him. We get to heaven, we'll feast our eyes on Jesus Christ. That's who we're going to see. He's the light. And life reflects him. When you see complications, when you see complexity, when you see design, you see him. That's a God honor. That we honor God. So God loved the world that he gave his only begotten son, that whoever believes in him should not perish, but have what? Everlasting life. That's the name of the game. We told you that death in evolution is how evolution exists. Evolution has to be what? One step at a time. It's got to be death, death, death. Creationists say, Christians say that Christ defeated death. Death is not part of our equation at all because we live in eternity because we believe in Jesus. The next keeps us together. Life is a gift from God. First Adam had the free will to obey God and failed. Last is that the second Adam, Christ, gave us the right to become saints. That's what it says. It's very clear in the scripture. So we have the gift of God. We have the gift of light. We have the gift of life. And because there was a first Adam, there was a second Adam that defeated death. Thank you so much. I hope this was helpful for you. May God bless you.